Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next in my series of Mindful Meets. So today we are joined by Emma Jamieson. Hello, Emma.
Hello there, how are you?
Very well. And Emma is a nutritional therapist who specialises in all things digestive and in gut health. And we'll understand a little bit more about why she specialises in that area in a moment. But Emma, you are very welcome to the Mindful Eating Clinic podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So we're going to explore you and explore how you got into being a nutritional therapist. And I know, like me and like many of my guests who come on the podcast, there is a personal experience that drove you towards that career choice. And then also we're going to tell our listeners and our watchers on YouTube, I'm just going to wave for your benefit, hello, talk to everyone about the gut health element, but also a few seasonal things, because we are recording this in autumn, and there are some specific conditions which might present themselves a lot in autumn and winter, so we're going to have a look at that as well. And then maybe, if we're very lucky, Emma might share with us a few easy tips, things that we can just look at in terms of our diet, what's on our plate, and how we're feeling in general, and maybe making a link. And in fact, you know, we might actually start there, Emma, making a link between how we're feeling and not just thinking it's one of those things, or it's something that I have to put up with, and maybe perhaps taking the step to talk to someone like you to make the connection between how we're feeling and what we eat, because they are rather inextricably linked, aren't they?
They really, really are. And I think people are realizing more and more how linked they are. They're finding all of these axes around the body. So, you know, it's not just that your brain's doing one thing and your liver's doing another thing, and you know, your skin's doing something else. They're linking the gut to these different parts of the body. So we now talk about the gut-brain axis. So what you eat and how you digest it can affect your mood. The gut-liver axis, the gut-skin axis, and it goes on for all the other organs as well, really. And so, yes, I love doing gut health because actually there's a connection to all the other parts of the body.
Yeah.
And very often, by, you know, working on the gut and the health of the gut, you start to have effects everywhere else.
And that's quite interesting, because there's a lot more conversation, isn't there, now about the gut and the brain axis, but I don't hear a lot of conversation about gut and liver or gut and skin. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I mean, well, certainly with the skin, things like you know, dry skin, if you're not taking in enough of those healthy oils and things like that, then your skin is going to suffer. At the moment, I'm working with someone who has scalp psoriasis. So for her, you know, we're working on her gut to have an effect on her scalp. And again, yes, I don't work particularly with skin issues, but I do know that, you know, other colleagues, people with acne and eczema and things like that, it can all, you know, it can all work through nutrition, certainly supporting those conditions.
And it's quite hard, I think, to get our head around it, actually, because you think, hang on a minute, my gut, and people listening can't see what I'm doing, but I'm kind of standing up and showing where it is. You know, everyone knows where their gut is, but you know, the distance between here in my gut and here in my brain, for example, you know, it's quite a long way, isn't it? But then in the way everything else is connected, the endocrine system, the way the blood flows through everything, our nervous system, of course, it makes sense. But I think it is quite interesting, isn't it, how long it's taken for it to get into common parlance. I mean, I know that specialists and scientists have been talking about it for a long time, but it's only really relatively recently, isn't it, that the impact of gut health has been commonly and frequently talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exciting because it's this new area that, you know, people are looking into and finding new discoveries every day.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because at the basic level, we have to break down the food that we eat to absorb the nutrients. And if there's a problem going on, if we're not digesting things properly, we're not getting any nutrients from our food, you know, it makes sense that the rest of our body is going to suffer.
Yes, yeah, sure, because it's putting strain on, isn't it? Because it's not doing it as comfortable a way, in as efficient a way as it should, and then that can have knock-on effects. And actually, that brings us nicely, I think, to actually how you decided, or why you decided to go into nutritional therapy, because you had your own symptoms, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So mine were classic digestive systems, but, you know, sort of feeling 6 months pregnant at the end of every evening as I sat on the sofa, you know, pain, discomfort. I went to see the doctor a couple of times. I was sort of told I had IBS, and that was all they could really do for me. There wasn't anything that they could do apart from give it a label.
Oh, really? So
Yes,
that
yes, and
was it.
I was sent on my way.
Yes.
And so I started kind of looking into it, and I started changing things, and I started changing the way I eat and how I eat, which has as much of an impact as what you eat. And gradually realized that I was making my symptoms, you know, disappear. And so, yeah, I looked into, you know, making this my career, really, a second career, and went back to school, and yeah, and qualified a few years ago.
Yeah.
So yes, it was. If I hadn't had the symptoms myself, I probably wouldn't have started this journey. So in a way, I'm quite glad I did.
Yes, exactly. And you know, not exclusively, but I think that when we are driven by something that happened to us to find a new career, because I started this career in my mid-50s, which is relatively late, I guess. I think we have you know, we have a very strong desire, don't we, to help other people avoid what we've been through, and to point them in the direction of the solutions. You know, I work with people of all different ages, but sometimes if I can help someone in their 20s and 30s to get out of a pattern of disordered eating, or an eating disorder, whatever it might be, and not have to live with 40 years like I did, you know, that's the joy, isn't it, of making somebody's life better, improving their well-being. It's interesting what you said just then about how we eat being as important, and of course, as you know, perhaps I should say how we know each other. So Emma and I met when we were both studying, when my poor old 58-year-old brain was crunching through the eating disorder practitioner material, and we met on that. And I think we happened to be thrown into a breakout room, weren't we? And we were just sharing. So that's how we met. So we have that knowledge in common, although I know you don't tend to specialize in the behavioral side, but it must help, I'm sure, to have an understanding of, you know, what might be in the background. So that's how we met, people. So I went slightly off at tangent, but you talked about the how. So mindful eating is what I'm all about, as you know. So talk to us about the how from your perspective, and how important it is.
It overlaps, if I'm perfectly honest. The mindful eating is something that I normally touch on in the first couple of sessions with any of my clients, because, you know, in my intake questionnaire, I ask if they chew properly, and it ranges from no to not as much as I should do. Very rarely do I get anyone who says yes. And so we talk about.
I'm just going to ask you the question. So, do you think people know what properly is?
No, but I think they know that if you're feeling that you're swallowing morsels of food, then you know you're not chewing properly. I don't tend to tell people you must chew each mouthful 20 times, but just as a little bit of information, you're looking for a puree consistency. You're looking to really, really chew.
And the point that I make, Emma, is that if we're trying to make food a really enjoyable experience, and for lots of people that come to me, it's not so much, because there's a lot of anxiety and shame and concern attached to it. But if it's going to be enjoyable and pleasurable as we want it to be, then we need to chew because there are no taste buds once we swallow it. You know, it's just stuff moving around. It's not, so all the benefit of the taste and the texture and the savoring has to happen before we swallow it, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And from a digestive point of view, the chewing not only breaks the food apart so the nutrients are available for the body, but because you're engaging the brain, because you're sensing, you know, all those tastes and flavors, your brain starts producing all the digestive enzymes that it needs to further down your system to be able to digest your food properly. And so mindful eating, really, you know, sitting and looking and taking a few deep breaths. And then I tell people to go through their 5 senses as they're sitting looking at their food, including can they hear it sizzling or popping or anything like that. You know, and you can feel that your saliva starts to be produced, and the knock-on effect on your digestion is quite remarkable.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas if you don't chew, then and you're basically swallowing lumps, then what's potentially the impact of doing that?
So first of all, if you've eaten so fast that your brain doesn't even know you've had something, it gets to your stomach, and your stomach doesn't have any of the acid production that it needs to have because it hasn't had the time to prepare. And so it sits there, and it will sit in your stomach, you know, feeling heavy and uncomfortable. And, you know, I don't know if your grandmother used to say this, my grandmother used to tell me that my stomach doesn't have teeth, but it's the same thing. You know, there is so much more work to be done by your stomach and your small intestine if those morsels of food haven't been broken apart.
Yes, makes sense, doesn't it? I say to my clients, imagine that you're a food critic on MasterChef. What are you going to say, you know, about that? Oh, well, I'm getting the garlic. Oh, I'm not. It says on the menu that it should have truffle on it. I'm not getting truffle. I'm not suggesting. I mean, I certainly don't cook with truffle oil. Maybe somebody listening does, but you know, so that sort of analysis going on, and if you've cooked it yourself, maybe the taste is interesting versus what you're expecting, or just to sort of take that time to really engage with it. You know, from a prep perspective, I think that also helps to slow things down. And so I was also thinking before we came on that just from the odd conversations that I have with my own clients about symptoms that they have, that I wonder if there are quite a lot of people who have symptoms like, I think one of the common ones is bloating, isn't it? And they might have flatulence, they might have irregular bowel movements, they might have fatigue, brain fog, all these kinds of things, who don't associate it with food and don't think that there's any solution out there. They think so. It would be really, really helpful, I think, to go through the kinds of symptoms that might present themselves that can largely, I mean, I know it's difficult to generalize, but largely can be either improved or eradicated through the right dietary approach.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on a lot of them. As far as the digestive issues go, yes, people come to me normally with bloating, constipation or diarrhea, or a mixture of the two. Pain and discomfort are quite often there as well. And then, yes, there are, you know, headaches can be a sign of an imbalance that digestion can help with. Or there are so many hormonal issues. There's a wealth of approaches that can be taken to balance your hormones.
Yes, and actually potentially to look at diet, if we're not keen on taking medication, to look at diet before we go down the HRT route, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
To see whether that can be
the phytoestrogens, if you're, you know, if you want to increase your estrogen levels in your body, then adding those into your diet can you know, it's not going to have a huge impact, but it can, you know, added up, it certainly effect. And then, yes, like we've said, you know, the skin and
and hair, I guess, and all those sorts, because all those areas of our body are barometers, aren't they, for what's going on? Our nails and our hair and our skin and eyes, I think, also, isn't it? Eyesight as well. Yeah.
And it's immunity, you know, at the moment we're in the middle of winter, dare I say it, levels of COVID are you know, around us, arising and around us, and you know, the digestion can have a huge effect on your immune system, which brings me to my greatest love, which is the gut microbiome, that incredible collection of beneficial bacteria that are working for us. 70% of our immune system is in our gut, because you know, because they are constantly surveying and checking what we're taking in. And so if you're keeping them in tip-top condition, and really supporting them and giving them the foods that they want, you know, they're going to help you. They're going to help you fight off the seasonal colds and flu and things like that.
And if we've had a pretty poor diet for a longish period of time, is it possible to bring our gut flora up to a helpful level? I mean, because I think I read somewhere, and I'm not sure whether it's true. I think I read somewhere that once some bacteria have gone from your gut, you cannot reinstate them, but you can make the most of what you have left. Would I be right in that?
Yeah, I think so. If I'm perfectly honest, I think it's an area that is being explored, and I'm not sure that they've got all the answers.
Right, yeah.
You can certainly work on eradicating the less beneficial bacteria. And yes, you can't supplement, or you can't eat a food that is going to replace a certain bacteria.
Okay.
For a lot
it's gone. Yeah.
For a lot of it. It's gone. Yeah. It is harder work to bring it back. However, by taking some probiotics, or by introducing those sort of fermented foods into your diet, eating lots of different plant-based foods, you can gradually, you know, get the numbers up, and fill in the spaces so that the harmful ones can't come back and take up residence again.
What do you mean by that? Fill in the spaces?
Well, so if you think about the gut lining as being a long tube, if you don't have many bacteria in there, there is more room available for the harmful bacteria to sort of take up residence.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
What you want to do is you want to clear them out, but then you want to populate the rest of it. You want to populate the whole length of that tube with the beneficial ones, so that there's space for them to come back.
So it's a bit like having a party.
Yeah.
And filling the hall so full of your friends that that your enemies can't get in.
That is it exactly. Okay. I love that.
Okay. Excellent. Yes. So so you mentioned fermented foods, and some of you listening and watching might have already listened to the podcast that I did with Will Shotton last month, and he actually produces his own fermented water, kefir water. And so you can listen to all of that process. So there are things like kefir. There's also, so you mentioned prebiotic, probiotic. So run through those for us, Emma. What can we do? What can we eat and drink to help?
So probiotics are the bacteria themselves, which, if you're looking at food, would be fermented food. So yes, kefir, kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut are the sort of the main ones, but also things like live yogurt. You know, it doesn't have to be something that you've not heard of or tried before. Instead of buying a plain yogurt, make sure it's live, because that contains the live bacteria.
And on the shelves there are things, so on those probiotics, you know, there are things like Actimel and stuff, and they've got some sugar in, and I know that the sugar is required, isn't it, for the fermentation process. But I'm a bit skeptical about these mass-produced products. Also, the fact that it's just a small amount. And my understanding, in fact, I learnt this from talking to Will, is that there's so much very powerful acid in your stomach that unless you have a large-ish quantity of this live fermented stuff, your stomach's just going to hit it out of out of the court, out of, what do they say, hit it out of the ballpark. That's very American, but you know, and it's not going to really stand a chance. So your view on the little pots?
I would agree. I wouldn't be recommending Actimel personally. I'd be going for smaller brands. Probably go to a health food shop rather than the supermarket, although some of the, you know, some of the sort of more niche brands are now in the supermarkets as well. You could make all of these yourself at home without very much trouble.
Yes.
But that is
a friend in our village who makes sauerkraut.
It's incredibly easy.
And he's promised me a jar. I haven't seen it yet, but he has promised me a jar. And then just remind us the difference between sauerkraut and kimchi.
So sauerkraut is just cabbage normally, which has been fermented. The key with, if you're buying sauerkraut, is to make sure it's got the word raw or unpasteurized on the container, because obviously you can buy kind of German sauerkraut that is just for flavor, or just for adding to your Frankfurter, which has been pasteurized. So all of the bacteria will have been killed. Kimchi is a Korean fermented food, which is incredibly spicy. It's got a lot of chili in it. And I would agree. I would agree with the point about the stomach acid. What I would say is, if you're starting to take fermented foods, you want to go low and slow, because if you suddenly, you know, start drinking gallons of kombucha, you're going to find that you might not be feeling quite so comfortable. So just, you know, build it up, but have a little bit every day until you can get to an amount that works for you.
Okay. And is that because through that process there's gas generated, or okay,
just to make sure that your body can cope with it?
Yes, okay. So those are the pros. So buying them actually as they are in a jar, bang bang. But we can also eat stuff, can't we, to encourage our gut to do it itself?
Exactly. So these are the prebiotics. And there are certain foods that are really rich in prebiotics. So things like chicory, green bananas are a good source of prebiotics. They contain something called inulin, which is essentially just food for the bacteria. But also just ensuring that you have a really wide variety of plant-based foods. I'm not saying go plant-based, but I'm saying when you sit down and look at your plate, see if you can make half of it full of kind of vegetables, and try and get different vegetables over the course of the week. I like to challenge my clients to see if they can get to 30 different varieties each week.
Of veg?
Of veg and fruit and herbs and spices and nuts, plants, and seeds. Herbal teas would be included in there. You know, so if you have a white onion one day, have a red onion the next day. You know, that's two different things. And each of these different bacteria in our gut like eating different things, and we don't know what they like, but by getting this variety in, you know, you're improving the odds that you're keeping them all happy.
Yes. And then fiber itself helps, doesn't it? So if we have something like, ideally something like 30 grams of fiber a day is a good amount. Is that about right?
Exactly. And if you're eating things like potatoes and pasta and rice, so you're getting the fiber from them, it's possibly not the right time of year for this, but when it gets a little bit warmer, if you cook those and then let them cool down, they create something called resistant starch. And that in itself is food for the bacteria. So another way, you know, a potato salad, just by letting those potatoes cool down before you eat them, you're again benefiting those gut bacteria.
Oh, that's interesting. So if we have rice salad rather than cooked rice, because you don't mean to then reheat it, you mean to then have it in a room at a room temperature or in a cold state. And is that though predominantly whole carbohydrates rather than white, would you say?
Ideally it would be, but I don't believe it has to be. No, I think it's just that the structure changes.
Oh, interesting. I remember growing up with rice salad. We used to have it every single Sunday. I remember, for tea, and it had sweet corn, frozen sweet corn and frozen peas in it. Yeah.
There you go.
It's
what she was doing.
It's not a great memory, I have to admit. But then my husband makes coronation chicken with mayonnaise, and he always does that with a a nice rice salad. So I am going to say, right, darling, you can wheel out your 1980s repertoire.
Exactly.
And we'll be having rice salad every weekend. Well, no, I mean, this is really interesting because these are things that we don't tend to pick up. And also, am I right in thinking that things like onions and garlic and leeks,
Yeah, yes.
all high fiber, and also chia seeds, really high fiber, aren't they? Because they not only are they quite fibrous, but they also swell up.
Yeah, they do. Yes, and flax seeds are the same, especially if you just soak them for a little bit before you eat them. They will help to bulk things out and move things through.
Yes. I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball at you here because we didn't really talk about this, but I was having a discussion the other day about breakfast.
Right.
Do you have a view on breakfast? Whether it's good, whether it doesn't really matter, whether it depends on what suits you, what it should be?
My view kind of goes along with the fact that nutritional therapy is really personalized, because for some people, they can quite happily, do the sort of time restricted eating or the intermittent fasting that's so popular at the moment and go 16 hours overnight and not break their fast until midday, or they'll have a black coffee and a glass of water and they feel absolutely fine on that. Other people wake up and they need some food, and so I really do think it's personal. I don't think there's a one size fits all. It very much depends where how your body works, if it is metabolically flexible. So if once you've been asleep, if you've shifted into a fat burning mode and your body is quite happy to carry on burning fat, then you can probably skip breakfast. If your body wants some carbohydrates first thing in the morning, you're going to start feeling shaky and agitated and not able to start the day. Yes. And for those people, then breakfast is very much something they should be having. Yes. What I would say is the type of breakfast you choose makes an enormous difference. So when I say carbohydrates, I'm afraid, talking about a bowl of Frosties.
No,
I'm sorry. But a piece of sourdough, maybe with a couple of some protein in there, so a couple of eggs and some salad on the side would be a fantastic way to start the day.
Yes. Oh yes, I'm going to do a plug because it's my podcast and I can. Those of you listening and watching might not know, I'm now going to dip down, those watching on YouTube, I'm dipping down into my cupboard to produce this. And this is my Boosting Breakfast book.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is full of balanced protein, whole carbohydrate based foods around eggs, oats, toast and smoothies. So that is available. I will put a link actually in this podcast. But back to you, Emma, which is what this is supposed to be about. Yes, so I would agree, because you don't want to force people to eat breakfast if it just doesn't fit with how they're feeling. But I think often the diagnosis might be, if someone's reaching for biscuits at 10:30 and they haven't had breakfast, then that's quite a good indicator, isn't it, that actually probably they would benefit from starting the day with something a little bit more wholesome. Yes. So we are recording this in the autumn, and we did mention, didn't we, that there are some seasonal things, and I think you mentioned autumn disorder.
Well, I mean, then maybe not so much a seasonal thing, but just something that I'm seeing a lot at the moment.
Okay.
Certainly, are a lot of people with autoimmune conditions. So yes, again, we're working on guts and on digestive system as part of our approach to sort of helping them get those conditions under control.
Do you think there's a correlation between the fact that over the last 18 months to 2 years, we've been, rightly, in some situations, environments, very concerned about bacteria and killing bacteria everywhere within an inch of its life, and actually we've been living in a very sanitized world? I mean, I'm just wondering whether maybe it's a little bit too early to say, maybe we need to look back at research that comes out sort of later on, but whether there is a correlation between autoimmune system conditions and the fact that we haven't had any bacteria hardly in our lives, because we've been furiously hand sanitizing and worrying about every single doorknob, you know, for the last 18 months. What do you think?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, as you say, I think probably all needs a lot of extra work. The autoimmune is more about your body not recognizing self and attacking, you know, certain parts of your system. And certainly, you know, stress and stressful incidents are a major trigger of autoimmune conditions. So, you know, that would be interesting as well. You know, the high stress levels that people have been going through over the last couple of years could also possibly be playing a role.
Yes, sure. So the external factors will not influence your autoimmune system, but they will influence your immune system.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Yes. Interesting. So there's no reason really, is there, why the majority of us need to put up with any of these conditions? And so say I came to you with bloating, you know, and I felt, and I just had this, it seemed like permanently swollen stomach and some pain. Talk to us about what your process is. So how might you go about diagnosing that, you know, to then be able to move forward?
I'm not allowed to diagnose, but I start with an incredibly detailed questionnaire that asks questions that people haven't even thought about, but just helps me to really build up a picture of everything that's going on for that person, sort of health-wise. We look at things like their sleep, their exercise, their relaxation, and their food. You know, I ask people to keep a 3-day food diary for me so that I can really see what they're having and when they're having it. And we start to build a jigsaw, and we will talk about, you know, how long they've had it for, whether there are any triggering events, whether they think there's anything that's keeping it going. You know, some people will come to me because they think they have a food intolerance, and so we'll explore that in a bit more detail. For other people, no matter what they eat, you know, they just can't pinpoint why this is happening to them. So it is a little bit of a detective element to it.
You're a digestive detective. That's what you are. Try saying that after a night out. Yeah.
And yes, we work hard to make changes in all aspects of both diet and lifestyle, kind of building little layers. So we'll start with the basics, and then, you know, we'll try things. Sometimes things work, and I'm going to be honest, sometimes they don't work. And if they don't work, we tweak it, we take it out, and we change it. But often by putting in some basic steps and making people think about what they're eating and how they're eating and when they're eating, actually it really does start to make a difference.
Yes, because you're also a health coach, aren't you? So yes. You've got this holistic approach, and Emma will know this will make sense to Emma, because when we were doing our training, there was a lot of emphasis on looking not at just what and how someone was eating, but looking at, of course, the psychology and the behavior, but also the exercise and also the environment and also the relationships, because, you know, quite often they can have an impact, can't they? And it might be about stress, or it might be about, well, I can't really eat this stuff because my wife doesn't like it, or my husband doesn't like eating these things, he likes to go out and have this or that, you know, and sort of helping people actually sometimes navigate some of that is part of our job as well, isn't it? To help them to be able to live those lifestyle changes that are then going to help them to feel better.
Absolutely. And stress has such an incredible influence on digestion. You know, for some people, when they're stressed, they everything clenches up, and, you know, they become incredibly constipated. So that might be the reason for their constipation, is just they're so tense that they can't kind of relax and let things happen. The other side, you know, if you think about going for an interview or something, you get that jittery stomach and everything kind of is accelerated, and they go the other way. And very often, you know, I ask people to just start factoring in 20 minutes of me time, non-negotiable relaxation every single day. And even that is incredible, just, you know, what an effect it can have.
Yeah, sure. And also, I guess, if we've got quite stressful lives, then the impact of that means that we're not giving our nutrition the right focus and the time very often. Because I find with some of my clients that they're able to plan their day. So if they're working, they're able to plan their meetings and they know what they're doing. Or if they have a family, they know when school pickup is and all of that sort of factored in. How long do I need at the supermarket, whatever it is. But they don't actually put in their diaries a time to sit and eat. You know, that isn't given the same priority, is it, very often? So because of that, they're grabbing something, they're on the hoof, they're eating it in the car, and because they haven't had time, they're grabbing sandwiches and crisps, which per se are okay, but not if you're having them every day, because you're missing out on other good stuff that you could be eating. You know, so helping somebody with their lifestyle, sometimes their time management actually is what's needed, isn't it? As well as, you know, the stuff that perhaps we would think immediately that we trained for. You know, it's
exactly. And that takes, you know, if you think about someone sitting in the car wolfing down a sandwich as they're driving to get the kids from school, that brings us back full circle to they're not sitting and looking at their food, they're not chewing properly, they're not engaging. So, you know, it is all so linked. It's incredible, really.
Yes. And I think what that means for our clients is that we have a deeper and a broader understanding of them, don't we, of the way their life runs. And then it enables us to be the most pragmatic and practical in terms of what we suggest, because there's no point suggesting stuff for people if they can't possibly do it, you know. And I think sometimes we have to be quite creative, don't we, to think, right, how can I get sauerkraut in this person's life? You know, how can I kind of squeeze it in somehow? Yes, exactly. Oh, Emma, there's so much stuff, isn't there? But so you've given us a few tips. What can you leave us with? So some sort of simple things to think about, and by all means summarize some of the things that you said. Just easy things. So if somebody's listening to this and we're thinking, right, come on, I've got to get a grip. I've got to just improve because I know that I need to eat more healthily. Where do I start? What would you say to them?
So my top five things that I would suggest that anyone starts with. The first is think about how you're eating. Think about mindful eating. You know, I really am. I know I'm not just plugging you. I really do. That would be my number one.
Yeah.
Sit at the table, take some deep breaths, engage your brain, and chew. The second is that, you know, going back to that variety of fruit and vegetable or plant-based foods, you know, can you get to 30 in a week? Can you really support those gut bacteria and give them what they need? My third would be adding in some fermented foods. You know, go to the supermarket or go to the health food shop and see what you can buy and experiment. And if you like it, you can start making it yourself. Probably the next one would be the timing of the meals. So, you know, you don't want to just be giving your digestive system food the whole time without giving it the chance to just kind of have a spring clean, you know when it can shut down, know when it needs to start up again. So I try to get people to eat within 12 hours and then not eat for 12 hours. So, you know, if you start your day at 7 with a milky coffee and some breakfast, then try and finish your meals by 7 in the evening. You know, try not to do that snacking into the late part of the evening, because that gives your gut a wonderful overnight time to just do all of its cleaning processes and get ready for the next day.
Yes.
And then ideally about 4 hours between each meal as well, so that again there's a mini break where it can just do what it needs to do to make sure it's properly digested your last meal before you start giving it the next meal to think about. And then my fifth one is always about reducing stress. Look where you can make changes to just try and, you know, alleviate some of that pressure that we're all under at the moment, I think. And have some non-negotiable time when you shut the door and you do what makes you feel good each day.
Yes, super. And I would add, it isn't a tip, but to reiterate, like whatever you might be feeling in your body, there could be a direct link to either what you're eating or what you're not eating or how you're eating. And that it's a very simple way, a simple first port of call before you go to the doctor to see, well, let me get some advice and let me see whether just by not eating or adding something to my diet, I can actually improve this condition. And so on that, then, it's possible for people to approach you, isn't it, Emma, to have what you call a health review and to explore what's going on. Yes, okay. And then thereafter, they maybe sign up for some longer time with you so that you can supervise that transition. Would that be right?
That would be right. Yes. So I offer everyone a free, no obligation, 30 minutes just to chat together about what's going on for them, what they're struggling with, what they've tried before, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And then then I tend to work with people over about 12 weeks. That seems to be a good amount of time for us to really make some proper changes and for them to become habits. And to see a positive outcome. So you can book in for a health review anytime you like.
Super duper. 12 weeks is not long, is it? 12 weeks out of your life to change how you feel for the rest of it. That's not a bad strap line, actually. Yes. I mean, that's not really very long, is it? No. Great. Oh, marvelous. Well, food for thought. Oh, that's what I did there. Yes. Thank you, Emma, so much for joining us and imparting all your wisdom. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely.
And I will put all the blurb in the podcast and on the YouTube page, everybody, so you can get in touch with Emma. As ever, you can get in touch with me about any eating behavioural issues that you have. And like Emma, you can come on and you can have a half an hour chat with me just for the hell of it. You can even bring your own cup of tea and we'll have a virtual cuppa and we can discuss it. So thank you very much for listening and we will see you next time.